And you can see the blush, the red blush starting on some of these. They're going to be putting on a lot of size and a lot of weight over the next few weeks here. So before the peaches come on and we have thousands of peaches to deal with, we need to prepare just a little bit and get ready for the harvest. So today I wanted to focus a little bit on some of the different ways we're going to be storing the peaches and harvesting them when we get ready to do that. All right, you guys, well, I'm over here in the shade now, and it's almost going to be 100 degrees today. But with that heat coming on so heavy, those peaches are moving fast right now. They have all that heat, and they're watered well, and so they have everything they need to go to town and blow those peaches up really big. So I have a number of different storage containers and baskets and boxes here that are commonly used to harvest peach crop. So the first way of harvesting the peaches I want to show you is something really simple that is common. And when we ran our fruit stand down at our farm, we'd have a lot of the different people with fruit trees in their yard come down to our fruit stand, and they would bring these t-shirt bags loaded with fruit, and they'd just be loaded to the brim, and they'd be stuffed in here, and they'd have multiple bags, and they'd say, hey, here's all the fruit off my trees. Do you guys think you can sell them at the fruit stand? And sometimes it'd be so packed that the bottom of the bag might have a little hole or something in it, and there'd be juice leaking out the bottom because the lower part of all the fruit, whether it be the plums or apricots or the peaches or nectarines or whatever they brought us, was all squished in the bottom because it was so heavy. These things were loaded to 30 or 40 pounds full of fruit. A t-shirt bag, something that people grab quick. They usually have them sitting around, they're free. But I don't think it's a very good way to harvest your fruit because it ends up making fruit jam down on the bottom. And especially because there's no protection when you set the bag down. You set the bag down with all the fruit in it, and it crushes all the fruit and bruises it all on the bottom. All the peaches end up sweating in here together. Disease and bacteria become rampant. And so this stores very poorly for the fresh fruit. And I'm going to have to give it 0 to 1 on the category of effectiveness. All right, another common one that people use, they just grab quickly because maybe they have their fruit is overflowing off their trees in their yard, or maybe they didn't prepare and they go, gee, everything's ready, we got to go get some buckets or something, anything. And so a 5-gallon bucket is, again, something that is often used to quickly harvest the fruit, but it has its problems too, because I do say that it has some structure at least, so that when you set it down, it's not bruising all the peaches necessarily, and it does have a handle, so that does make it handy there. The only problem is that this thing is so deep, and you can see in there that by the time the peaches get down to the bottom, there's a level of maybe 4, 5, 6 layers of peaches sitting on top, and this bucket can haul another 40 pounds of stuff, and so everything on the bottom gets all squished out of its mind again. And when those peaches break open and they all get squished, and they start getting mold developing and bacteria is developing, it's not very long, just even a few days sometimes, if left out in the heat, for example, that stuff spreads to even the good peaches really quickly up top. So the bucket, even though it is quick to grab one and usually you have one lying around, still not a very effective way to harvest your fruit. And I would rate it maybe a 3. We'll give it a 3. So here's something that is similar to a bucket. Looks a little different though. And this is something that's very traditional. This is a full bushel basket, they call it. And that's kind of how they measure the fruit. They measure it by the bushels. But commonly today we use the pounds more than we do the bushel size. And so a bushel will hold about 40 to 45 pounds depending on the density of the fruit. Sometimes even up to 50 pounds. So this bushel basket holds a lot of fruit, and you can see how big it is. You can imagine all the peaches in here, just tons of them. Almost like a 50-pound bag. If you've ever bought a 50-pound bag of potatoes or a 50-pound bag of onions at the grocery store, you can imagine 50 pounds sitting in here full of peaches. So again, this looks really cool, especially for selling it. If you're going to go to a farmer's market, this has a really cool look to it. It's very traditional. But this, again, has its downsides. We had a few of the 80-year-old farmers that still had the orchards up there. And the one farmer, he used these on his lemon Alberta peaches, and he had the most beautiful lemon Alberta peaches. And they were big, and they were really healthy looking. They were great. but he used to use the traditional bushel baskets and the half bushel baskets to harvest his stuff. And so what he would do is he'd harvest them all in the bushel baskets up past the brim. He'd top them off real heavy like a mountain. And then he'd stick them all on his big flatbed trailer or his flatbed truck, and he'd drive them down to our fruit stand. And he lived maybe about 15, 20 minutes away. Well, by the time he's going down the road and bumping along the way, and the stuff is bumping here in the baskets, and the sad part was that about half the peaches did really well, and the other half down in the bottom, they all got bruised up and they rotted on us quick, and they had a lot of trouble. So we ended up only getting about maybe 60% of the crop because the rest of it got ruined because of the container that it's in. And so this one has a lot of pluses for display if you're going to sell it at the farmer's market. It looks cool, and it does have some handles, but it just ends up crushing all the weight, bears down on the ones on the bottom. And so I'm going to have to rate this maybe just a 4. Here's the next one I want to show you. Now, this is just a crate that we picked up at Walmart. We picked up several hundred of them, and we really thought these were good. They were on sale, they were cheap, but what we really liked about them was that they stacked. And this was effective for us down at our cooler and our fruit stand because we could palletize the different things we were harvesting, whether it was onions or potatoes or lettuces or whatever we were sticking in here. And we also liked the fact that they were plastic because when we were washing the different produces, these dry off really quick and they don't hold the water. And then we also liked the fact that they had the holes in here because the produce could breathe. And this one even has a crack in the bottom now. That's how old it is. But the water could all drain out. And so it was a pretty good crate for the produce. But it only worked for some of the different produce. This is almost about the size of a full bushel. So about 40 to 45 pounds will fit in here. So something like potatoes, they would do pretty good because the potato is pretty structural. It's pretty solid. It can take a little bit of weight bearing. But even on the potatoes, we noticed something with these big holes on the side. Sometimes down low here where the potatoes were getting the most pressure, in time they would press up against those big holes and they're a little bit sharp there. And so what would happen is the potatoes on the bottom would start having these circles on them, and it looked kind of funny. So that didn't go as good as we wanted it to, but the potatoes didn't do too bad. But we knew because of that pressure and those sharp edges in there that we didn't even want to try peaches on this container. So that's one of the downsides of putting fruit in something like this, is that if you have too big of areas, open areas like that where they can pressure against it, it's going to cut open your fruit again and ruin it. So I would rate the effectiveness of a crate like this maybe at a 6 or a 7. If all else failed and you had crates like this and you had something like that and you had too big of openings, you could cut a piece of cardboard and try to cushion the bottom, but they're not too bad, but overall they're still better out there yet. All right, the next one I want to talk about is boxes. And boxes are pretty standard for just about everything. These happen to say Utah fruit on them, and these ones over here are a 1/4 bushel box. So we saw that full bushel basket, and I'll just grab that. You can kind of see how big that is and how big the opening of that is. So this is just a 1/4 bushel. This is between 12 and 13 pounds to fit in there. And this right to my left, even though it has some tools in it right now, this is the size of a 1/2 bushel box. And so that's about 25 pounds that fits in there. So these boxes right here are something that we utilized a lot in our days at the farmer's market, selling fruit and all sorts of different fruits, apples and apricots and peaches and pears and everything. And they were very effective because they're cardboard. They are kind of soft, and so they do cushion it as good as they can. Especially the 1/4 bushels, they're not too deep. We can only fit about two high in here, 2 layers of peaches. And that is really helpful because the ones on the bottom aren't taking too much weight that bruises them and crushes them. So they can last a lot longer in these. So these really were some of the most utilized when selling fruit. If you can find something like that in your area, it's very effective. And also we would sell them in the boxes at 12-pound boxes. People really enjoyed that size. It was something that was small enough that they could eat through them all fresh and not have to worry about bottling and other things. Whereas if you start buying full bushels, you got to use that stuff up and deal with it. So now the half bushel box, we tried to do that too. Not as many people like that many peaches anyway, but the other problem was that it's actually deeper by almost a couple inches. Again, we'd start getting some bruising on the bottom, some crushing of the other peaches, and so we'd end up losing our crop for no good reason. That's really the goal of this video today, is to help you so that you're not losing all that hard work that came off the trees over the season just because you don't have a very good storage container for it. So the boxes, I'd have to rate them at probably an 8 because they are pretty effective. But these quarter bushel boxes still have their downside. And one of them is that they don't have any handles. The other one is that we can only haul 12 pounds at a time. I think we have one picture of the delivery truck full of peaches of these quarter bushel boxes. And you can imagine how much handling there has to be to load up hundreds and hundreds of these quarter bushel boxes. And so that's the one downside to them, is that you can't fit very much in each unit. And so it makes a lot of handling to work with these. Now at the last container, the one that I really wanted to show to you was these yellow containers right here. Now, these containers can fit about a full bushel in here as well, about 40 pounds. You'll notice that they're spread out a lot more, and they have small holes in them for ventilation and breathing and water to get through. And they also have handles on the container. And so this container solves a lot of our trouble with the peach crop. We're able to help with the crushing. We have good ventilation. And the other thing that we get out of these containers that the boxes can't do, as you saw in that picture, all the boxes were laid single file on the deck of the truck. And unless you build shelving in your truck, which we did have another truck with shelving, but the point is that these also are developed and built so that they stack. And so it flips around like that and they stack. And so you can get all the layers in there, and you can fill up a whole box truck or pallets of them. And that's the beautiful thing, is that if you're running a market farm, a truck farm or a market farm, and you're getting into a little bit more production and you need to palletize your stuff because you got to make space in your cooler or wherever you're at, these are going to be able to do that for you. So these are my favorite that we have found for the peach crop specifically. I still could use a lot of these other ones for potatoes or even gunny sacks for different stuff. But for the peaches, they're really soft and tender, and we need to treat them tenderly so that they make it to market or wherever we're trying to, if we're trying to store them for a long time, we don't want to bruise them all up. These are really, really awesome for harvesting the fruit. These can be found pretty much in many different places online. I think Uline has them. I think Glacier Valley is where we might have bought ours from. They're a little bit more expensive than some of these others, but if you take care of them, you'll have them for a very long time, and you can wash them off and use them again every single year. And they stack up really nice. They store away. Not like the boxes where we have to stack boxes and mountains of boxes. These all collapse down together. And the other thing you need to think about too is that for us, when we go to the farmer's market with our peach crop, we're selling them in baskets, and we're divvying them out in smaller quantities because we are dealing with a volume of people down there. They're trying to fresh eat the fruit. They don't want boxes and boxes of fruit. Usually they just want 4 or 5 or 6 they can take home and enjoy for their Saturday, and then they'll come back next Saturday and get more fresh peaches. And this allows us to be able to distribute those out into the displays a lot easier than having to dig through these deep ones or even the boxes. Again, if your strategy is to sell things by the box in heavy volume, then going for a quarter bushel box might be more beneficial to you than even this method. But again, you're not going to be able to stack these very well, and it's a little bit harder to store everything. So these really are my favorite. So if I was to give these containers a rating, I'd probably rate these either a 9 or a 10, depending on your sales strategy. For us, they just solved so many of the problems. It's like you're hitting 5 birds with 1 stone when you buy these. So I'm not pitching these for any particular company. They're just really effective. So whoever designed them, really good job, and thank you for doing that for us. One more thing I want to show you guys before we end this video. If we think about the peaches on the tree, so long as they're attached to the tree, The tree, kind of like an umbilical cord to a baby, keeps the peaches stored, at least for a little while. Now, after we pull them off the tree, the peaches are on their own. And so unless we want to leave them out in 90-degree weather every day, and they probably won't last too long that way, then we need to have some sort of refrigeration to help hold them, unless we're bringing them directly to market. And that could be the case too. If you want to harvest the peaches off a Friday night, you're going to the market on Saturday, or whatever the case. But if you can't sell them all, you have to bring some home, or you want to harvest on a different day, you may benefit from the refrigeration. So one of the things about these storage containers that you have to think about with your strategy, in order to have the boxes, we have to have good shelving inside the fridge, which it just so happens that this fridge up at our old house, that the peaches come off those trees, they come to this fridge. And we do have good shelving because this is a commercial fridge. If we look at this container here, if we try to stick these in the fridge, we're going to have a shelf again so we can put another one up above it. But this just takes up a lot of room. It being round and this being a square fridge, it just is not very effective for storage in a fridge or a cold storage. And we can't stack it either. These yellow ones fit in here nicely. We don't depend on shelves. And these create their own shelving. And they can stack up in here 7, 8 high. And they're square so they can fit in different positionings if we want to try to fit more stuff in the front. So there you guys go. We went through a bunch of the different containers and the storage strategies. And so it's really exciting when all the peaches start coming on heavy. The birds come after them, and some of them start falling off the tree because it gets windy. One of the things you have to remember too is that the fruit doesn't come off the tree all at once. It's going to come off in 2 different harvests on the peach trees. Usually the top half of the tree to the middle tree can be harvested first, and then the middle tree to the lower branches that ripen up just a little bit later can be harvested next. And so as you're doing these things in stages, it's nice to have a plan of how you're going to harvest this stuff and how you're going to maybe sell your fruit, maybe how you're going to store your fruit, maybe how you're even going to bottle your fruit or share your fruit with your neighbors. I hope that this was helpful in some ways to show you some of the different harvest methods that can help you. So I hope to see you guys in the next one, and we'll be harvesting peaches here soon. Thank you guys for watching our videos, and if you found these helpful or enjoyed them, please consider subscribing or liking our videos. That would be very helpful to us. See you on the next one.